It is Wednesday, April the 7th, 2010, General Committee, and today they're going to be discussing the access to and acceptable use of IT resources right here. In fact, it's a deputation today. I've been maintaining and have by now considerable evidence. Call the meeting to order. They have no control staff. None.
And I hope I've clarified a few things around what can be accessed, what can't be accessed, and the types of technologies that we have in place and what we can do with them, as well as the software that was mentioned in that corporate report that came forward a month ago or so with regards to the internet usage management. If there's any questions, I'll entertain them.
Madam Chair, if I could just add, so what we were hoping to do today is get any additional feedback from Council on the presentation. We have gone back and re-looked at the policy and tightened up a couple of areas that we thought with respect to specifically who can authorize the investigation. So after we have the discussion today, our intent would be then to look whether we need to make further modifications based on the feedback, and then we will be back to Council with the revised draft and a report to recommend the adoption of the policy at a future meeting in a couple of weeks.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members of Council? Councillor Prentice?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Jack. Is our policy basically the same policy that the majority of municipalities use?
For the most part, it includes those components that are in the other policies.
So we're not really doing anything outside the box as far as adopting a policy that's stricter or more lenient or...
Not at all. In fact, we're bringing it up to date to be more like the other municipalities because it is so, because of the what we specified in there, the technology is so...
Well, I certainly think it sounds reasonable to me. I mean, there has to be some protection by the city and of the city. So I think that from what you presented, it certainly sounds reasonable. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Parrish?
Well, yes, thank you very much. I wish I'd have had your report ahead of time so that I could have gone over it a little bit more thoroughly and compared it to the February 3rd report, because I still have a lot of questions from the February 3rd report that haven't been answered.
That's right.
Jack, do you know how many municipalities have separate systems for senior staff and councillors?
No, I'm not aware of that. Separate systems, as in unique to the rest of the staff?
Separate servers, independent completely of the staff in the building?
No, I'm not aware of that. I can find that out.
I would like that to be found out.
Just to clarify, Councillor Barrison, that would be for email, for...
Emails, pin-to-pins, the whole thing you've described.
All of those components.
One of the things you very kindly sent me was the Spectre 360 Employee Monitoring, Surveillance and Investigation printout. And it says, if you detect a problem or suspect a specific employee is the main culprit of abuse, you can dig deeper and review every detail of the computer and internet activity to gather the evidence you need. The level of detail is so precise you can see what an employee does each and every second. So that's quite a sales pitch. It says, which employees are spending the most time surfing websites? Okay. Who's spending time on shopping sites, sports sites, adult sites, which you say are filtered out? Which employees chat or use anonymous email services like Hotmail and Gmail? Who is sending the most emails with attachments? Which employees may be leaking company confidential information via removable media like flash drives, CDs, and DVDs? Which employees are printing sensitive documents? Who is arriving to work late and leaving early? Who takes long lunch breaks? What are my employees searching for on Google, Yahoo, and MSN? So this is a pretty nifty little spy kit that we've got. What I would like, because I keep hearing you say the same things repeatedly through your presentation. You said several times, no one individual has access to the location where pin-to-pin messages are stored. You say email can be retrieved if authorized, which is still not clear to me who, and as the city manager said, we're not clear as to who the authorizing authorities are. You said several times will only be used if required. I don't know what required is. What are the criteria for accessing this stuff? And you keep saying only under the policy, which we saw on February the 3rd, but it's blended into your presentation today. You say the BlackBerry voicemails are not recorded, but pin-to-pin messages can be monitored. And you say that if you don't delete an email message immediately, it goes into a server 24 hours later and is collected centrally. So what I'd really like to have happen, because I'm so far totally bewildered, I'm a BlackBerry freak, but I'm not even computer literate. I'd like this presentation again next week at council. Sometimes we get things like ROPA 24 over at 15 different committees, so I don't think council will be bored to tears if we do this again next week. Bring with you or have in our package the corporate report for February the 3rd, just so we can draw some comparisons. Ask the city manager if we could get the data on how many councils have separate servers for senior staff and management staff and councillors. And I would like a little history of how many people we've caught with Spectre 360, because it's obviously been in operation for a while. So I'd like this presentation again. I'd like it to be at council because it's on television, and I would like people who are phoning into my office to know exactly what the rules are when they call in, what the rules are when they send me an email, and I'd like to be more comfortable with this because you did a great job, but it went so fast I'm 6 miles behind you. So if the rest of council would agree, I'd like the same presentation with the added information next week. And I would move that we see this presentation again next week.
And that's certainly not an issue. If I can just speak to one of the first comments you made, Councillor Parrish, one of the things that we've tightened up in the revisions when we went back and relooked at the policy is to be very specific about who can authorize an investigation. So it will say it's only the city manager. So we're trying to be very, very clear about that point. So maybe what we will do next week, as well as bring forward the February 3rd report, that we can, I'll just double check, I think it's ready. We can also attach the revised draft, the one that we are proposing to bring back to you in its final form. You may as well see that as well, so you can see the changes that we were going to propose to make as a consequence of our last conversation with council.
And through you, Madam Mayor, I want to make sure the city manager knows I'm not being paranoid. I already am thoroughly paranoid. I have my own separate BlackBerry. So this isn't for me. This is particularly so that we educate all our staff and so that we educate the constituents that are sending emails to my office so that everybody's completely aware. You can do anything as long as everybody's totally aware of it. And I like the part where you have the warning that comes up on the screen every day for employees. This is all terrific, it's all well and good, and it's all above board. But I would just like an opportunity to have this presented again in a forum where they'll be on television.
Yeah, we can do that. I just want you to understand that when we rolled this policy out initially, all employees were put through, so I don't think our employees
Well, I wasn't, and I'm not considered an employee, but I was not aware that pin-to-pins were retrievable, so I just want to make sure everybody has all the right information. And as you mentioned, the authorization chain would be very good too. And I thank you, Jack. You did a good job.
You did, yep.
Mayor McCallum?
Excellent report, Jack. We're very proud of the accomplishments of our IT information department. We have some wonderful arrangements with other companies. So I think we've been most successful. Have you compared our system with the province and with other municipalities as to how our system compares? There's a lot of regulations out there. I know in corporate sector, BlackBerries are not allowed at board of directors meetings, etc. I know that doesn't come into this policy, but there are a lot of policies out there in regard to BlackBerries and cell phones, etc. Have you done a comparison? How does the province deal with emails and all the items that you in this report? Is our system similar, or is it not? Is it more strict? Is it less strict, or what?
The province uses the BlackBerries the same way that we use the BlackBerries. Of course, they have many, many more. Same with the federal government.
Yeah.
The one presentation that I attended with the federal government is they have 10,000 devices out there. Of course, it's across Canada, and have to set up those arrangements across Canada for deployment and so on. But as far as their use goes, it's a standard almost across all municipalities and across the province to use the BlackBerry Enterprise Server as the secure way of communication between your existing email systems, whether that is Lotus Notes or it's Microsoft Outlook that we use, or previously when we had GroupWise, that use that communicate securely between your internal systems out to the BlackBerry.
Okay, how about the management or the regulations as to what can be checked? Is our policy in line the same as the provinces or other municipalities?
I'm not sure the policies with the province, but with other municipalities we're very much in line.
We did a comparison, and it was circulated to council.
Turn off your cell phone. Thank you.
I don't know how, sorry.
They don't know how. Using your technology like us. We don't.
Sorry.
Thank you, Ursula.
We did a comparison, which I thought included the province. We updated it and circulated it to council, and unfortunately, I don't have a copy of it in front of me, but our staff did check with the province, and again, the policies in terms of managing content and usage are very similar to ours. I'll get that recirculated to council.
I think it should be recirculated. I think it's something that should come back to the council meeting as well, so that people are aware that our policy is in line, where it's out of line if it isn't, with other municipalities as well as with the province. And the feds, yeah. Because, thank you.
Councillor Carlson?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Jack, great presentation. A lot to absorb if you're not from the technical end of things, but I appreciate it's getting more familiar to me as time goes by. I'm interested, I hope when the report comes next week that we also have it marked up. I guess we usually do what the changes are between the old and the new. And secondly, I'm wondering, at the end of all this, when you're doing all your monitoring and so on, what typically happens, like for John Doe number 1 with 11 hours or whatever it was, you did all this work, you send it to somebody, what are the follow-ups within the city? Are you monitoring for one reason, and what happens to John Doe? What are the steps afterwards?
As part of the replacement, that quote that came from internal audit and that came from a report that was to replace this software that was no longer going to be functional with the technologies that we had in place. And one of the things was to establish what are that high watermark or benchmark that you would say is too much surfing. A number of of course, you only want to have that if it's surfing to non-business sites during business hours. Because if we said if it's a very personal or occasional use that you're going to do it during before and after hours, so we certainly wouldn't want to report on that. So one of the things is to come back and staff with this project, and I say it's very new, we're just in the process of replacing it, is to come back to the leadership team and to bring back a recommendation around what is that high water mark. So is it 2 hours, is it 3 hours, what that is. But only report on the exceptions, so that the exceptions are to sites that accumulated in that time that are non-business related sites.
I could see an issue, for instance, maybe let's say the communication department, where it may be somebody's actual job to monitor YouTube for certain things, and I guess it'll take a little while to shake all that down because that sounds like a fun job. But maybe if you had to watch YouTube all day long, it might not be. But I don't know. Then you get a little warning pop up on the computer, knock it off on the internet, or somebody comes over and talks to you, or what's the plan? Or we haven't done it yet.
I mean, I don't want council to get the impression that, we're going to have people chasing employees around. I mean, this is a way of understanding what's happening in the organization. If something looks unusual, you can make an inquiry. But if it's the job of public affairs to monitor media sites, I think, and I'm not sure if Jack made this clear, and he can correct me when I'm wrong, but as I understand it, like if a staff's job is to go to certain websites, like media sites or whatever, those can actually be taken out of the monitoring. So, you know, a public affairs staff who looks at the Star, the Globe and Mail, the Financial Post, YouTube, you know, CBC, CTV, you can take out all of the normal traffic that would be part of their routine out of this monitoring. So it really is a way of trying to understand exceptional behavior, something that's not in the normal routine of someone's work. If someone in engineering and works, you know, goes into the Hanson site on a regular basis to get, you know, information about something that's happening, or they go to the Ontario Good Roads. I mean, we can gather that information and profile that individual, so that's part of their job. That's not even going to show up. So I mean, we want to be intentional and intelligent about how we use this information. So I think it is actually good, and maybe we'll clarify this next week when we come forward. I mean, it is good to do this publicly, because you know, this is about managing. It's not about reprisal. It's not about anything other than we have a multi-million-dollar resource that we want to make sure is being used for the purpose for which it's intended. So Jack, you nodded your head, but I just want you to confirm that what I just said is correct.
Bang on.
Okay.
Thanks, Madam.
Councillor Sato?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I think it was very clear and very concise. I have no problem with it coming again to council next week so that it can be on television. You've answered most of my questions that I had, and I guess my other questions relate directly to the report. And Janice, you've already indicated that there have been changes and will be changes made as to the access and who will be the approval process, or who will be allowed access. So I look forward to that coming and having that discussion. You know, I think the good thing about this is the monitoring of the amount of bandwidth used, because I think we all know that the city server the network can be pretty slow. And there's that morning when time in the morning when everyone's logging on, and at 8:30 to 9 o'clock when it can take forever. And when I'm here, I don't log on to the network. I guess I'm on standalone, but I'm on the server. So it's a little bit faster, but I still have experienced times during the day when you know that there's so much bandwidth being used that everything crawls to a stop. And usually, too, if there's breaking news, I think you can pretty well tell that most people are on the news sites because everyone is browsing and going on the internet and, you know, finding out what's happening, that type of thing. And again, everything crawls to a stop. So I think we have to be able to monitor that and to take a look at that excessive use, because it's very important that our staff are able to manage their day-to-day work in an efficient way. And if you're waiting for, you know, the server to open your email, then it's taking forever to do it, or send your email and doing your work because some other people are browsing and, you know, casual websites, then that is a problem. So, you know, because it adds to our staff's day and our own days as well. So I think that is important. One question I have, and that's with regard to the Blackberries. Why are the pin-to-pin not on the external server? That was one thing I didn't understand. So if someone, I ask Katie, because you know I don't like the BlackBerry. I use it very rarely. I get yelled at by my staff because I forget to look at it. I forget to turn it on. It's always on quiet, so I don't hear it. So I have to physically look and see if the light's flashing red to tell me that I have a message, which I don't do very often. So I ask Katie questions about how to use the BlackBerry. Fine on the computer, but don't like that thing. Yeah, well. But, you know, if someone can send a message, and obviously if you don't want it to be on the city server, then you just send your messages to the person's BlackBerry email address if you want that privacy. So there is an option. But I don't quite understand why the pin-to-pin would not also be on the BlackBerry server, since it's using, isn't that assigned by BlackBerry, the pin? I guess not, it's assigned by the city.
No, the PIN is assigned actually by the device itself by BlackBerry. And so when a pin-to-pin message is sent, it uses the, for lack of a better word, it's the infrastructure, not unlike a road, but the road goes through our BlackBerry server to know where to go out, and it uses our internet connection, uses RIMS connections to then get it out on antennas and out to your device. I think many people think that a pin-to-pin message is what I just said. It goes from there directly from that BlackBerry device to that BlackBerry device, and in between it doesn't do anything else. It's not like a radio. And you think of a radio that the police use or the fire use, where it actually goes between radio to radio. That's not how a pin-to-pin message. Essentially, it's an email message. It's no different, and uses infrastructure to get between a device to a device.
Yeah, I realize that, but I guess my question is, if the email which you're sending to rogers.blackberry.net doesn't go through the city server, why could the pins not also go through that same, the Rogers server, for example? Because that's where they're going.
Right. That is just the structure and how that.
And that can't be changed.
No, that's just the way the architecture is set up.
Okay, so that's set, cast in stone, can never be changed. So if you want to use pin, then you know it's going to go on the city server.
That it's
So if you don't want it to go on the city server.
That is logged, yes.
Right, so if you don't want it to go on the city server, then you use your email, BlackBerry, Rogers.net, or whatever that is.
Correct.
And that's totally external and it doesn't fall under this policy at all.
That's correct. Or another email address that is off the city server.
Right.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I have no further questions from members of council. Councillor Parrish has recommended that this report come back next week to council so that it's viewed by our residents. All those in favor? Great. Thank you very much, Jack.
Don't crash the ambulance. Whatever you do,